Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Ayin Aleph in Sanhedrin. Today is one of the top, if when somebody made no, this is the top 50, but so somebody made a list of sort of the 50 Gemaras that people should know. This daf is one of them. And so let's go over where we are and we'll get started. Let me share my screen. Hold on just a second. Okay. So, we're now in the 8th chapter of Sanhedrin, which deals with a ben sorer umoreh. That's somebody, a son, a rebellious son, which was the last of the violations for which one would be liable to stoning. We had a whole long list in the 7th chapter of all of the violations that are subject to stoning, and the last of them was ben sorer umoreh, and we went through each of them in the 7th chapter, except for ben sorer umoreh, which we've set aside. Essentially, they made a separate chapter out of just the discussion of ben sorer umoreh. And as we pick up on the third line from the bottom of Ayin Amabet 70b, the Gemara continues the discussion of how the violation requires both eating meat and drinking wine. So we're going to see that at the moment we have the only things that we've said that the ben sorer umoreh has to have are: one, he has to be the right age, right? Just after his bar mitzvah, but before he fully matures, and physically, and there's basically a 3-month period when that is relevant, and then and then we've said that he has to eat a certain amount of meat and drink a certain amount of wine, and that's where we are at the moment. We've also noted the fact that this drinking of wine and eating of meat is only going to be problematic if it is habit forming. And so as a result, that's one of the questions that we are discussing at the moment. So our Mishnah said, as we begin on the beginning of the third to last line on Ayin Amabet, if you ate any kind of meat, any kind of food, all different kinds of food, but you didn't eat meat, and you drink all kinds of liquid, but you didn't drink wine, well, then you are not that person is not going to be a ben sorer umoreh. So what is covered in this that you might have thought would justify the person being a ben sorer umoreh? Achol kol macha v'lo achol basar la'atuye devela keilis. That if in fact you had a pressed figs from keila, then you would still not be subject to the prohibition. Now, why might you think that you would be? Well, take a look in the last Rashi on the last line. Devila keilis mi oto makom, from a place called Keila. The afal gaf de mishakra, even though you're eating a solid food, it is intoxicating. Even though it is intoxicating, we're going to say that you're not liable. Lo mechayev alav de lo mamshich. It doesn't have the same addictive qualities as meat. It's interesting to think. Actually, I hadn't even thought about it until now. But whether whether on some level this is highlighting the dangers of addictive behavior more generally. And the fact that, when you think about drugs, etc., that actually can be problematic. So frequently we see people, spiral out and become the people that we're specifically worried about here in this violation, because their addiction has caused them to be violent and criminal because they need to feed their addiction and they don't have the resources to do so. So we're going to talk a little bit about that over the course of today. Shasa komashka below shasa yayin, back into the Gemara, second to last line, middle of that line. La tuye dvash v'chalav, that even if you drink honey or milk, which we will see in just a moment are also potentially intoxicating, that's going to still not be sufficient. It isn't as addictive, and as a result, it's not going to be problematic. Titania, and how do I know that all of these items are on some level intoxicating? So we're now in the last line on Ayin Amabet, third word on the line. Titania, we have a brisa. This is referring to a Kohen who eats pressed figs from Ke'ilah, b'shasa dvash v'chalav, or he drank honey or milk, v'nichnas lamikdash, and then he entered the Beit HaMikdash, chayav, he's liable, as we turn to Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph. And so as a result, that is, and again, chayiv, take a look at the top Rashi, mishum v'yayin v'shekar al tashet. The Gemara, the pasuk says, Vayikra Perek Yud pasuk Tet, says that you should not eat drink wine or have an intoxicating beverage before entering the Beit HaMikdash. Ubakohen askinan, and we're talking about a Kohen. So that is the prohibition, and even though when it comes to a Kohen who is having these pressed figs or the honey or the milk, we say that he's not allowed to do so, and he's going to be in trouble for violating the prohibition of going in to do the service if he has had some intoxicating beverage. That's enough for that prohibition, but it isn't enough for Ben Soromora. It's a different kind of concern. The concern, again, is about addiction more than it is just about the feeling of intoxication.
Is there a specific quantity or percentage of the wine? Is that, for instance, if he has the wine mixed with alcohol, with the vodka, does it have to be 51% of wine for him to be chayav ben sorah? Or is it 20% or 70%? Or
that was a question that we dealt with I think yesterday, maybe it was 2 days ago, that and the answer is that it seems that as long as there is some wine in the intoxicating beverages, so then that's going to be sufficient. It does, you can be completed with other kinds of beverages. Now, it's not completely
we mentioned
clear.
It regarding the meat.
It wasn't explicit. It wasn't explicit as to whether or not what the story was with a majority. I'm not 100% sure on that. One would think that you still need a majority of wine and a majority of meat, but it was clear that the Gemara recognizes that as long as you eat the right amount of meat, so even if some of it ended up being chicken, that was going to be okay, and even if some of it was some other kind of alcoholic beverage, that was going to be okay, as long as there was actual meat and actual wine. Presumably it has to be a majority, and the amounts were given in I think yesterday or 2 days ago's in one of the Mishnayot that we studied, and we'll get back to them in a moment, because we're going to reference them again. Okay, I believe it's a log of wine.
Right, but that's true. That's the beginning of the Torah says that. But the question is, what's the percentage? We learned yesterday, lahashlim, it mentioned the meat. You remember that, and because it was a question, one of the Rebbeim, I don't remember who, brought up whether the oaf could be included.
Correct, exactly. And the answer is that oaf can't be the only meat, but it can be enough to supplement. So it's not, again, the Gemara is not completely clear. I have not gone through the halachot of Ben Soromora to see whether you need a majority or just or any amount, but it is clear that it doesn't have to be 100%. Okay, so Eino Nase Ben Soromora Achi Yochal Basar V'Yishtayayin. Again, after saying that it can't just be, you must have some meat and some wine, it says again that you need to have meat and wine. So Tana Rabbanan, now we're going to have a source for that. Achol kol machal v'lo achal basar, almost paralleling our Mishnah. The language here is just the difference between this and our Mishnah is just the last verse that we will cite. So if you ate food and you didn't eat meat, shasa kol mashka v'lo shasa yain, you ate all kinds of drinks, but you didn't drink wine. Eno nasa ben sora mora achi yochel basar v'yishta yain. You got to eat meat and drink wine. Shneamar zolel v'sovei. That's what the pasuk says. This is a pasuk in Dvarim, Parakov Aleph, pasuk Kaf. V'av al pisha ein raya l'davar zeich l'davar. So how do I know that zolel v'sovei are references to meat and wine, respectively? Shenamar, because it says in Mishlei, al tehi v'sovei yayin bizole vasar lamo. So be not among the wine guzzlers and gluttonous eaters of meat. So the point is when it comes to sove, it refers to yayin, and when it comes to zolele, it refers to basar. So that highlights that although again not 100% proof, it highlights that those are the words that it's talking about. V'omer ki sove v'zola yivaresh ukraim talbish numa, and this actually hints at the reasoning of this. So this is the next pasuk there in Mishlei, and it hints at the reasoning for the prohibition, because a guzzler and a glutton will become poor, and a slumberer will wear tattered clothing. Meaning, often we see that if you eat a lot and drink a lot, you become tired, and so not only will you become poor, but you'll become so poor that you'll be asleep, and you'll be sleeping in ruined, tattered clothing. And as a result, highlighting that the Ben Soru Mora is going to have no resources and will therefore need to steal in order to survive. Now, Rabbi Zera teaches another lesson from that second pasuk. Amar Rabbi Zera kol hayashin beveis hamidrash. Anybody who studies in the Beit Midrash, Torah so nases lo crime. And his Torah becomes all torn up. Shene'amar ukraim talbish numa. You're going to wear again. If you sleep, you wear tattered clothing. So, and a useful lesson. This lesson actually is a halakha that is in Shulchan Aruch, and so it's worth noting that we should be careful not to sleep in a Beit Midrash. Okay.
How about sleeping during the rabbi's sermon?
Yeah, that's a good question. Usually that would be a shinat arai, and shinat arai is a little bit more permissible, but in any event, it's again probably not the most polite thing one can do. Okay, so we've now established that the kid has got to eat meat and drink wine. What else does he need to do? So we're now going to see 3 different things that is not going to be liable, and then the fourth is, if you imagine a opponent back, the fourth will be the liability. So Gana Mishel Aviv Achal Birshus Aviv, if he steals from his father and then he goes and buys the wine and meat and he eats in the home of his father, or Mishel Acherim v'achal birshus acherim, or he steals from others and he eats outside his home. Mishel Acherim v'achal birshus aviv, or if he steals from others and he eats in his father's house. In all of those situations, Eino Nasa Ben Sora Mora. He's not going to become a Ben Sora Mora, and the Gemara is going to explain why. Why the last of the categories is the only situation where he'll become a Ben Sora Mora, and that is Ad Sheyignov Mishel Avid. He needs to steal from his father, the Yochel B'Rshus Acherim, and then he needs to go and eat the meat and wine that he buys with the stolen funds. He needs to eat that in somebody else's yard. Why? And Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Mishel Aviv Mishel Imo. He can't just steal from his father. He also needs to steal from his mother. So now the Gemara explains why are the first 3 not a problem and the last one a problem. So let's take a look. Let me scroll my screen and we'll continue. So Ganav Mishel Aviv Achal Bershus Aviv Afal Gav Teshchiach Le Bais. The issue is that when it comes to the father, to stealing from the father and eating in his possession, eating in his yard, so then even though the shchiach he has access, right? Growing up, I knew where my parents kept the cash. Right? I didn't take any of the cash. I'd be in big trouble if I did, but I knew where they took the cash. I had the access. Okay. But Bais, if we take a look at Bais, Rashi, fourth of the wide lines at the top of Rashi, in the first Rashi in the Gemara. Mitpached mi'aviv, he's afraid of his father. Shelo yavin, so that he'll end up understanding what happens. Meaning, if all of a sudden your son is sitting in your kitchen eating a $300 steak, and you're going to be like, where'd you get the money for the $300 steak? And so you're going to understand that your son is stealing from you, and you're going to rebuke him. So hilkach lo mamshech, and as a result, maybe he'll do it once, but he's not going to take chances because he knows his father is likely to discover him and he's going to get in trouble. And so as a result, he's less likely to have it become a habit. Similarly, if he steals from third parties and he eats in the place of the third parties, well, even though he's not worried about his father discovering him and getting rebuked from his father, he doesn't know where other people keep their money, and as a result, it's going to be harder for him to steal from them. And of course, it's really going to be problematic for him to steal from others and eat in his father's house, because his father's going to rebuke him if he catches him, and he doesn't know where the money is. So right? He doesn't know where the money is, and he's going to be afraid. So the key situation where he's going to be liable is if he steals from his father because he has ready access to those funds, and he eats in other people's yards, because he has that access, the low bias, and he's not going to be worried. He can thereby develop the bad habit. We need to be aware. Again, to me, one of the things that we can all take away from the lessons of this Gemara is that we need to be aware of what is causing us to have bad habits and do what we can to avoid those habits. Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Ad sheyigna mishel aviv u'mishel imo. So we saw that the Mishnah said that according to Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Yehuda, you needed to steal from your mother as well. So Ima minalan, how does she have any funds? How does she have any money? Masha kansa Aisha kanabala. Whenever she makes an acquisition, her husband gets possession of it. So 3 answers. The first will be rejected, and then the other 2 will stand. Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Chanina, Misuda hamuchenes la'aviv. No, maybe what it means is that the son stole a meat and wine meal that the father had paid for the mother and the father. Meaning, they ordered a steak dinner from a nice restaurant with a bottle of wine, and it comes and they set it all up, and then they go to wash their hands in the bathroom, and the son comes in, takes it all, and he goes off and he eats it. So maybe that's the situation, and that would be what we're talking about. But 1 second, that can't be. Amar Rabbi Yochanan bar Molada, Amar Rav Huna, Eino chayiv ad sheyikne basar bezol v'yochel yayin bezol. No, the kid is only going to be liable if he's buying cheap meat and buying cheap wine, because the point is that it needs to be something that could be habit forming. If he buys expensive stuff, if he buys expensive stuff, he doesn't have the money. Right, so he's not going to be as habit forming. He knows that it's a lot easier to steal a little bit of money than it is to steal a lot of money. So as a result, because you get away with it because nobody notices it was gone. So the point is that, but here he stole the food itself. So yayin, so here he wasn't buying it, he was stealing the meal itself, so that can't be. So ella ema midimei suda hamuchenes la'aviv. No, he stole the money that was set aside. So the parents put aside the $120 for the meat and the wine dinner that they were going to have, and the son comes in, he takes that money and he goes and buys cheap wine and cheap meat in order to, then he's going to be liable. So that's how, because the father set the funds aside so that both he and the mother can eat together, so now that's going to cause liability. Or somebody else caused her to acquire funds. V'amarla, and said to her, Almanasha ein leva'alich rishus bahen. Listen, I'm giving you money, and your husband has no right to it. If a person were to do that, then the husband doesn't have any rights to those funds. And so as a result, maybe that's the situation. So there is a possibility of having the mother have her own funds that the son could steal.
Well, we discussed this many times before, where the woman, she goes out to work and she can say to the husband, "I don't want you to provide for me. I'm going to provide. I'm going to use my if I'm going to gain money." Or that's one case. Or in the next day, bars that she brings money in from the ketubah from her father's house, and so there are other ways she could have money.
100%. It's an interesting question. I did not have a chance to investigate this, but it would not surprise me if the Rishonim talk about that, because you're absolutely right. She could also bring, certain funds that she has that are agreed to, that she's going to have the access to the funds. So there are a number of different ways that she could have rights to money. He can give her an allowance. As you know, again, a lot of these issues we saw in Maseches Ksubas. So you're absolutely right, and this is just highlighting some of the ways where an ordinary wife, not an extraordinary wife, could end up having funds, because often in those situations, it's an extraordinary circumstance that results in it. So the simplest circumstance is, of course, setting aside some money for her to eat. Okay, so
didn't we learn before, and Rashi highlighted it, that it says if sheyignov me'aviv, that he would be pater because he's committing an avera. If he's committing an avera, then he's not chayav ben soreh umoreh, right?
correct. You have to. If the point is that if I think what you're talking about is that if you buy non-kosher meat or something along those lines, non-kosher wine, so then you're not going to be liable. We had seen that. Is that what you're referencing?
No, Rashi, and I think the Gemara, and Rashi highlights, I think yesterday, the day before, he says, Vayigno, and it's a whole list of things in which the Mishnah mentions, in which he would not be chayav ben soreh moreh, because he's violating he's committing an avera, he's violating. So therefore, that makes him patur.
No. Those situations were all situations where that as a result of those situations, it was less likely for it to become habit forming. That's the way I understood that. So it's not necessarily about the fact that there's some violation, because if that were true, then the fact that has to steal from his father and mother, that would be a violation. The point is that there's a specific structure. You need to engage in specific violations and not other violations.
Yeah, but I remember I have to find it. But Rashi,
all right, you'll find it, and we can talk about it at the end.
Right, if I can.
All right, so we back onto the next Mishnah, and the next Mishnah explains that the parents must be united in deciding that their son should be declared a ben soreh moreh. Haya aviv rotze ve'ima eina rotze. So the father wants to kill the kid, and the mother doesn't. Aviv eina rotze ve'ima rotze, or vice versa. Einu nase ben soreh moreh ad sheyehu shneim rotzen. Until both of them are ready to kill the kid, it's not going to no liability. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, im lo haisa ima ru'uya la'aviv, einu nase ben soreh moreh. If the father and mother are not fit for one another, and we'll see what that means in a moment, then he's not going to be a ben soreh moreh. And that's the question that the Gemara begins with. My eina ra'uya. What does it mean that you're not fit for one another? So how so first ilema chayve krisos v'chayve misus based in, maybe they're not fit for one another because they're not allowed to be married, and they would actually be subject to the death penalty or to kares if in fact it were proven sof avua ninhu ve'ime ninhu. But the mother's the mother and the father's the father, so that can't be it. Take a look in Rashi. Sof. It's the Rashi right opposite the last narrow line on Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph. Sof aviv ve'imo ninhu. Daha bikra lo cause of ishus beimo etzel aviv. The Torah never references that these parents are actually married. They don't have to be married.
Right.
They could be separated or divorced even. So it's, at least it seems. So Ella b'shavela aviv kamar. Rather, it's saying there's some kind of equation between the two. And what is that equation? Rashi tells us b'shavela aviv b'kol ub'mara b'koma. That they have to have a similar voice, a similar appearance, and a similar height. The time of Mefarish L'Kamen, and we're going to see why in just a moment. Tanya Name Haki, we have a brisa that highlights this point, and indeed is in the name of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, im lo haisa imo shavela avid bekol uvamara uvakoma. If they're not similar to one another in voice, appearance, and in height, so einonaza ben sora mora, then you can't become a ben sora mora. My timer, what's the reason that you need to have this similarity between the parents? Damar kra einenu shomea bekolenu. He doesn't hear our voice. Our voice suggests a singular voice, and apparently a singular nature associated with it. Because they need to have similar voices, they also need to have a similar appearance and similar height. So, Kiman, Ozla Hadatanya. So now that we have this basic understanding of Rabbi Yehuda, we're going to ask a question that, the unlikelihood of Rabbi Yehuda's situation may help us explain another brisa. Kaman Azla Hadatanya. Who is this brisa like? Ben Soro Mora lo haya velo asad liyos. That the no one was ever killed as a Ben Sora Mora, and it will never happen. V'lama nechtav, why was it written in the Torah? Drosh v'kabel schar, so that we could learn about it and we can receive the reward. Come on, who is that like? Rabbi Yehuda. Well, it must be like Rabbi Yehuda, because if you think about it, how likely? First, you need to have a rebellious son, or maybe I should put it the other way. First, you need to have parents that are similar in voice, height, and appearance. This is very unlikely. Very unlikely. And then you need the child to have been rebellious. So all four of those things need to happen before you have a problem. So now you can understand why it could be said that it never happened and it never will happen. Or you could say it was Rabbi Shimon, because Rabbi Shimon says it explicitly. Tanya, I'm Rabbi Shimon, because he ate a tartamar of meat, and that's the volume of meat that is relevant. Vishasa chatzi log yayin italki, and he drank a half log of Italian wine. Of v'ima motzino sola staklo. His parents are going to take him out to stone him? Of course not. No parent is going to be that cruel to their child. One would hope. Ella lo haya v'lo asad liot. Rather, it never happened and never will happen. V'lama nichtav. Why was it written? Drosh v'kabel schar. In order for us to learn and receive reward. Rabbi Yochanan. Ani received v'yashavti al kivro. I saw it and I sat by his grave. I sat on his grave or by his grave. And so I know, in fact, that it did happen. So once we did this one item that never happened and never will happen, we now cite two other things where there is an opinion that says it never happened and it never will happen. So Kaman Oslo Hadatanya, Irani Dachas Lo Haisa Velo Asidaliyot, Vilama Nichtav Drosh V'Kabel Schar. What about a city that is destroyed because it all worshipped idols? So that also, the brisa says, never happened and never will happen. And why was it written? Only to receive reward. So come on, Rabbi Eliezer, that's like Rabbi Eliezer. The Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer, Omer, Kol Ir Sheyesh Ba Afilu Mezuzah Achas Eno Nasas Ira Nidachas. Even if there's one mezuzah in the entire city, you can't destroy it. Because, why can't you destroy it? Because there's a prohibition. My timer, what's the reason? Amar Kra, the Eskol Shlala Tikbot El Tok Rochova, the Sarafta Be'esh. You need to take every possession that exists in that city and burn it. The Kevan to Ika mezuzah, and once there's a mezuzah in the city, lo efshar, that's no longer possible. And of course, if there's a Torah or something like that in the city, you wouldn't be ela to do it. Teksiv lo tasun kein la Hashem elokechem. You're not allowed to do this to Hashem, your God. The prior pasuk tells us it's a commandment to destroy all of the worshiping places of the Canaanites and all of their idols, but we're not supposed to do that for Hashem. So that's exactly the point. So, but Amar Rabbi Yonatan, back into our brisa, Ein ani ra'itia v'yashavti al tila. I saw it and I sat on its rubble. Meaning, again, I was there. I know that it happened. And the same Rabbi Yonatan from the prior brisa. Third example now of this situation. Sorry that I didn't scroll. Here are the two situations. Third, second example, but third of the cases, right? So we had the case of Ben Sora Mora, case of a Ir Hanidachas, and now Kiman Azla Hadatanya. Who's this brisa like? Bias Hamenuga Lo Haya Velo Asliyos. There was never a house that had a nega. A nega is referring to tsarat, leprosy. There is leprosy of the body, and there is leprosy of clothing, and there is leprosy of buildings, of structures. So, but this brisa says there never was. Now, you may ask yourself, well, what about the Rashi in Torah that says that the whole purpose of this saras was to say that we should discover where all the wealth was hidden by the Canaanites, and that Rashi is citing a midrash that disagrees with this opinion in this brisa. V'lama nichtav. So why again was it written? Again, like the other two, drosh v'kabel schar, in order for us to learn and receive reward. Come on, who was like that? Rabbi Elazar b'Rabbi Shimon. It's like Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, Ditnan, Rabbi Elazar b'Rabbi Shimon, Omer, La'olam eina bayas tamei ad sheyera'eh kishtei grisin al shtei avanim. You need to have two grisin of a size of, which two bean size areas of a tsaras, and b'shtei ksalim b'karen zavis. They have to be at a corner next to one another. Arko kishnei grisin v'rachbo b'gris. And they need to effectively come together. So you have two grease size things that are in a corner. And so as a result, you can see the angle is a 90-degree angle, are in a quarter, and they end up coming together. So when you look at that corner, you see a double grease, two grease in length and one grease in height of tsaras. And so that's a very unlikely thing. And so as a result, that's presumably that's why there would never have been such a location. My time of the Rabbi Elazar, the Rabbi Shimon. Why does Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, require those to be next to each other? Because the psukim that talk about tsaras on a wall are say the following: ksiv kir, uksiv kirot. It says wall and it says walls. So when is there a space on a wall that looks like one wall but is actually two walls? Ezu kir shehu kirot. Havi omer zek karen zavis. It's got to be a corner. So Tanya, and we have a brisa that says the opposite view. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Sadok, makom haya b'tchum Gaza. There was a place in Gaza, v'hayu koren oso chorvasa sigirta, and they used to call it the ruins of a place that was closed off, namely a closed off house because of tsaras. Rabbi Yishimon ish kfar Yaakov, and similarly Rabbi Shimon the from Akko said, Pamachas halachti leGalil. I once went to the north to the Galil. V're'izi makom shemitzayin oto v'amru. I saw a place that they were marking, and they said, "Avanim menugaos pinu misham." We removed some tsaras stones from there to there. So so they were marking a place so that people wouldn't go there. So bottom line is there's this machlokas as to whether or not it actually ever existed. Okay, and this Gemara is like I said, is one of those very, very famous Gemaras that say, highlight these three things that are in the Torah and are there for us to learn, but really may never have actually happened. Haya echad mehem gidim v'ochiger o ilem o suma o cheresh eno nasa ben soramor. If one of the parents is missing a hand, or is lame, or is deaf, is mute, or is blind, or is deaf, then the son cannot become a ben soramora. And how do we know? Because we're going to learn out from the psukim. This is from Parakaf Aleph, Pasuk Yud Tet and Kaf. What does it say? Shneamar v'tavsu bo imva aviv v'imo below gidmin. Right? You need to grab onto him. You need to hold him. So if somebody were, God forbid, lacked a hand, so then they would not be able to hold him that appropriately. And they took him out. Well, that's velo chigrin. You can't be lame. V'amru, and they said velo ilmin, so they can't. They have to be able to speak, so they can't be mute. B'neinu zeh, this is our son, this one. Velo sumin, so he can't be blind. They can't be blind. Einenu shomea b'kolenu. He's not listening to our voice. V'lo charshin. Therefore, they can't be deaf, because only if they're able to hear are they able to hear that he's in fact not saying, yes, I'm going to handle it later, or I'm going to deal with it, but to know that in fact that he's not listening to them at all. So Masrin Bo B'fnei Shlosha. First, he gets warned in front of three people, and we'll see why three. In fact, we'll see that it really is two, but because the Gemara is going to deal with that shortly. Umalkinoto, and he gets lashes. So before he's going to get killed in that 3-month window, he first is going to get lashes. Chazar v'kikel. Kilkel, he does it again. He nidon be'esrim v'shlosha. Now he needs to be judged with 23 judges. Ve'enu niskal achi yehu sham shlosha rishonim. The first 3 judges who were there and sentenced him to lashes need to be present for that. Shene'amar b'neinu zeh. This our son, zehu shalaka b'fneichem, who was flogged in front of you. So that's how we know. Now the problem is we already said that B'nai Nuzeh taught us that they can't be blind. So how is it teaching us 2 things? Well, that the Gemara is going to address as well. Okay, so the Gemara begins by wondering whether our Mishnah supports one view in a dispute that we saw several weeks ago. So, Shama mina be'inin krab b'kidiksiv. Doesn't this show that you have to fulfill a verse exactly as it's written? As we see last Rashi on Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph, Svisiyata de Shmuel, be'parak nigmar hadin. We saw Shmuel say all the way back on Mem Hey Amabet that in fact, maybe you need to fulfill every word of a pasuk. And if you can't fulfill every word of a pasuk, then it doesn't apply. Because after all, that's what we just said. You have to fulfill every word of this pasuk. So doesn't this support that position? So no, shiny hacha. This could be different. The kule kra yiserahu. As we turn to Ayin Aleph on Mebet, we say that this entire verse is all extra. So umasrin b'fnei shlosha. So when we said that he needs to be warned in front of 3. So lamali, why do we need 3? Betray sagya. 2 should suffice. So Amar Abaye Hakikamer, this is what it really says. Masrin bo b'fnei shnayim. The parents warn the boy in front of 2 witnesses. Umalkinoso b'fnei shlosha, and then he gets lashes to before 3. Malkos beven sora umora hechab ksiva. Well, 1 second. Where in the Torah does it tell us that you get that a ben sora mora gets lashes at all? So to the Rebbe Abahu, it's consistent with the learning of Rebbe Abahu. Now, Rebbe Abahu's learning is a little confusing. So, but I'll do it outside and then we'll go inside. Basically, he says the following, that the same word that appears in Ben Sora Mora also appears in connection with a Nara Morasa who is accused of having an affair by her husband after night 1. And, yes. And then, in addition, Ben Sora Mora also has a word that is similar to a word that is talked about in connection with lashes. And so as a result, all 3 of those topics are therefore connected together, and all 3 receive lashes. The husband who falsely accuses his wife of having an affair before they married, and the Ben Sora Mora, both of them will get lashes if they engage in their violation. So how do we see that? Kid Rebbe Abahu, Dam Rebbe Abahu, Lamadnu v'yisru miv'yisru. We learn that they have to chastise from they have to chastise. So 1 is in connection with defaming the wife on after night 1, and 1 is in connection with Ben Sora Mora. V'yisru mibain, and we're going to have the connection of within Ben Sora Mora, it has both the word the Yisru and it has the word Ben, son, and Uben mi Ben. And we're learning from son in connection with Ben Sora Mora to son, which is written in connection with lashes, because it says, V'haya im bin hakos harasha, that if in fact it's going to be the guilty one, he is going to be subject to lashes. So there, the bin is not literally a son, or it literally means son, but it means in the context that he's subject to. But the bottom line is that we have that same word, and so all three topics are connected, and so you get lashes both for a defamer and a ben sora mora. Okay. We said that if the son, after having been lashed, if he does it again, he's judged by a court of 23. Haimi boile zeh below sumin. Well, 1 second, we already used the proof text of zeh to tell us that it's not a blind person. So no, we can still learn two things here, because im kain, if we just wanted to tell me that the three original judges need to be present, lichtov b'neinu hu, he, our son, meaning he, our son, is the one that you already lashed. Yeah. So my b'neinu zeh, why this one? So shma minei tarti. Now we can learn two different things from this lesson. Okay. Last Mishnah for today. So Baruch ad shelo nigmar dino. What happens if the kid ran away? He gives zaken hatachton, and then he fully matured. He got the pubic hairs that are necessary to have so that he would no longer be subject to the punishment. Putter. Now he is exempt because he was never found guilty. He was only accused. Right. The emission nigmar dino baruch, but if he ran away after the guilty verdict, then tough luck. You were already found liable. You're going to be killed. Now, Rabbi Chanina has a statement about that also seems to be supported potentially by our Mishnah. And we are going to try to support him and then contradict him. And with that, we will conclude the day. But here's the statement that Rabbi Chanina makes, and you'll see that it's similar. Es Hashem, if a non-Jew, a Noachite, blesses Hashem's name, meaning it really means curse, but it would use the term blesses because we're using a nicer language, and then he converts. Now, maybe the court didn't know about his cursing of Hashem, or maybe for whatever reason they did it anyway. Putter, he becomes exempt. Hoel v'nishtana dino v'nishtanes misaso. The procedures that apply to him, namely, remember that a non-Jew can be convicted on one witness. A non-Jew does not require hasra, does not require warning. A non-Jew does not require 23 judges. So all of that is different for a Jew, and so those procedures changed, and his death changed, because a non-Jew, according to the largest majority of opinions, is killed with beheading, and the cursing of Hashem, God forbid, is killed with stoning. So as a result, the death penalty also changes. So Neima Misayayale, maybe we should say our Mishnah supports him, because it says Baruch Achalo Nigmar Dino gives Zakin Hatakton Putter, that when it comes to the Ben Sora Moreh, if he runs away and then he was never found guilty, and he now gets mature, and so he's going to be exempt. My timer, why is he exempt? Don't we say that because his status changed, that's why everything changed? No, not necessarily. Lo, shiny hacha de avid hashta la bar katalahu. No, the point is that if he did the act now, if he did the acts of stealing from his father and mother and using the money to buy cheap wine and cheap meat, that he would not be liable for the death penalty now that he is mature. That's why it's different. So Tashma, now we come to try and challenge Rabbi Chanina. What about the end of our Mishnah? Well, if he runs away after he was convicted, he's still going to be killed. So doesn't that contradict Rabbi Chanina? So no, Nigmardina Kamar. No, of course not. You already said that he reached a verdict. Nigmardino Gavra Katilahu. Once you reach a verdict, the person is as good as dead. So as a result, that's not going to be sufficient. That's not a proof against Rabbi Hanina. So what about the following? Tashma ben Noach shehika es chavero uval eshes chavero v'nisgayer pater. If a Noachite, if non-Jew, hits somebody, right now we're assuming it, and in fact it will, his friend, meaning somebody who is like him, meaning also a non-Jew, or he has relations, he commits adultery with the wife of another non-Jew, v'nisgayer, and now he becomes Jewish, pater. He is exempt from the death penalty. Asa Cain be Yisrael. However, if when he was a non-Jew, he did any of those things with a Jew, he hit the Jew, or he had relations with the wife of a Jew, v'nisgayer, and he converts, chayav, he is still liable. So, why, according to Rabbi Hanina, should this be the case? Nema ho of ishnu ishnu. We should ishtane. We should say that because his status changed, and so as a result, he should no longer be subject to the death penalty. No. Dino umisaso bi'ininan. The Gemara explains that no, we need to have a change both in the context of the nature of the laws and in the context of the death penalty applicable. If you only have the change in the nature of the laws, in the procedures, that is not sufficient. V'hai dino ishtane umisaso lo ishtane. But here, the death the procedures changed because, of course, he's now Jewish, so he needs 23 judges, he needs warning, etc. But the death penalty itself did not change. One second, Bishlam wrote, well, that works when it comes to a murderer because because whether a murderer is Jewish or not Jewish, the proper penalty for murder is beheading. And so as a result, nothing's changed, even though he's become Jewish. So it all works. But Ela Eshazish, Mi Karasaya Vahashtachenek. He originally, when he was not Jewish, he was subject to beheading. And now that he is Jewish, he's subject to strangulation, which is the penalty for adultery. So, Benara Hamel Rasa. So the first answer is maybe we're talking about a Nara Hamel Rasa, a betrothed Nara, who's between the ages of 12 and 12 and a half. That that in that case doesn't make a difference whether the person is Jewish or not Jewish. You're going to get stoning because that's the method of execution. V'ha asa kain be Yisrael. 1 second. But if you take a look at the wording of the Brisa, it seems to be Asa Cain be Yisrael. He does the same thing with the Jew. So it can't be that the non-Jew in the beginning of the Brisa was having an affair, having adultery with a Nara HaMorasa, because a Nara HaMorasa is only applicable to a Jewish woman. A non-Jew has no betrothal. So it can't be. Dumya de Eshes Chaveru Ketani. It seems like it's comparable to the wife of a Noachite. So it can't be that we're talking about a Nara Morasa. Ella Kala B'Chamura Meshach Shaychi. No, the point is which is the more severe penalty, beheading or strangulation? Well, according to the majority opinion of the rabbis, beheading is more strict than strangulation. And so as a result, even though the non-Jew goes from the strict penalty of beheading to the non-strict penalty of strangulation in connection with adultery, he's still going to be subject to the death penalty. That works according to the rabbis who said that beheading was the more severe, but we saw that there was a disagreement about that topic. Ella Rabbi Shimon de Amar Chenek Chamor, but Rabbi Shimon said that strangulation was more severe. So my Ikala Meimar, how do we answer that? So Rabbi Shimon Savarla Kitana de Bei Menashe. No, Rabbi Shimon holds like the Tana of Bei Menashe. And what did that Tana say? De Amar Kol Misa Hamur of Noach Eino Elachenek. So our presumption was incorrect because Rabbi Shimon, who says that strangulation is more severe than beheading, also says that when it comes to a non-Jew, the general penalty for a non-Jew is strangulation. So that he is getting the more severe penalty. And so as a result, before he engaged in the affair, he got strangulation. And now, after he engages in the affair, he's also getting strangulation. So it all works. Well, Bishlam Ish, that you're right. It works when it comes to having an affair with a married woman. Mi karachenek v'hashrachenek. It's before it was strangulation, and afterwards is strangulation, according to Rabbi Shimon, and according to Rabbi the Tana of Bey Menashe. But Ella Rotzeach. Well, now when it comes to murderer, mi karachenek v'hashra sayef. He goes from strangulation to beheading. So the type of death penalty has changed. But no worries, because even here, kala b'chamura meshach shaychi. Because what are you going from? You're going from strangulation, which is the more severe, to beheading, which is the less severe. And so as a result, even though there's a change in death and execution, the method of execution, nonetheless, when you go from a strict to a less strict, that is not considered a change in execution, such that even if there is a change in the procedures that apply, we will not still, we will allow the person who is converting to still be killed. The lema misayele sarkav akar kach bagra tidon bechanek. So in second, what about the following brisa? Doesn't this support Rabbi Chanina? Again, Rabbi Chanina says that if there's a change, that you're going to end up with being not liable. That we say that when it comes to a betrothed nara who sins, and then she became an adult, and so tidon b'chenek, she's punished with strangulation, which is the punishment of her post maturity, and not the punishment that she would have gotten if she were caught and everything happened when she was still a nara. Beskila my time alo. So what's the reason she's not getting stoning? Lav mishum deho ishtane, because her status changed. So as a result, we're going to change the situation. And so certainly here, when you have a case of a blasphemer who's not Jewish, who's completely changed through conversion, it makes sense to that he should be exempt. So no, in fact, Rabbi Yochanan said that the Tana who taught that was wrong, and that in fact this should be taught as that she's punished with stoning. So as a result, we have no proof to Rabbi Chanina's statement, and in fact, and so as a result, we conclude without being able to prove one way or the other the nature of change that needs to happen. That we seem to say that as long as that you need to have, again, according to Rabbi Chanina, you need to have both a change in procedures and a change in execution, and that will result in some further change, but we have no proof to Rabbi Chanina's statement. It does seem that the law that he says does seem to be the way we conclude, but it's the question of how we apply it in other situations that the Gemara ends up not being able to find another source. So that brings us.
What is the case? Well, he committed this crime, whatever it is, Eshet Ish or
well, it depends.
Arrested, and then he converted. Is that it?
That is, yes, that is the case. And the question is, what crime did he commit? Because if he committed blasphemy, he's going to be totally exempt. But if he committed any of those other crimes, murder or adultery, we've seen that if it was with a non-Jewish woman, well, then he will become exempt. Or a non-Jewish person, he will become exempt. But if he did it with a Jewish woman, or he killed a Jewish person, so then he would remain liable. So it depends on what the violation is, what the rule is going to be upon his conversion. But this brings us to the next Mishnah, which explains why this Ben Sorah Umorah's crime are deserving of the death penalty. But for that discussion, you'll have to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf.
If he kills a non-Jew, he converts, he's exempt. Is that what we said? He's not liable for the murder he committed?
Correct.
So person doesn't like a non-Jew. The non-Jew spits at him. He looks at him another way, kills him, and then he says, "I'm going to become Jewish tomorrow." He's exempt. I mean,
Yeah.
it
Yeah, I mean,
sounds.
that's not to say that the court wouldn't take appropriate actions if they felt that the person was dangerous. But you know, as we've seen earlier, the laws of associated with that are different between we saw that stealing, hitting, etc. It's a difficult Gemara, but in our modern sensibilities. But understanding that there was a great need for protection, one can understand a little bit better why Gemara would be so kind as to sort of reach the conclusion that technically one is exempt from murder in those situations. But the bottom line is that that doesn't mean just because you're exempt from the penalty doesn't mean that it's not a wrong thing to do. Indeed, one could argue, and in fact, there are a variety of situations where we say that maybe, in fact, the one of the situations we saw a couple of weeks ago, or maybe even a week or two ago, in connection with Moloch, that if you do Moloch for all of one's children, so then you're not liable any longer. And is that somehow less of a sin? One could argue that it's even a greater sin to have done put all one's children through Moloch. So some people say that actually it's so bad that there's nothing that you can do that can accomplish any kind of atonement. So it could be that there's an element of that's going on as well. That obviously here this person has now become Jewish. It's what he's done is so bad that we're not going to even allow him to have that possibility. But most likely it doesn't seem like that's the
Well, I
case.
mean, so
It's
there are
somehow less
people
bad.
they can. Oh, wait a second. But killing a non. Well, that's not the same. I'm saying if he kills a non-Jew, then that's something else.
Yeah.
But but in this case, if he kills, he
If it not,
kills.
the Gemara says, right? I mean, the Gemara quotes a price, and now is a halacha actually like this price? So let me just check.
If he kills
So
and then he becomes Jewish.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, well, what do we?
if the point is that if then he is exempt from the death penalty. And again, it doesn't say that.
So that implies if a Jew kills a non-Jew, he's exempt too from a death penalty, right?
No, I don't think so. Hold on.
Why not? I mean, isn't that the same thing? If a Jew
Well,
kills a
I mean,
non-Jew.
he's not. You are correct that he's not subject to the death penalty. It's not that you're not. It's just to be clear, it's not mutter. You're just not subject to the death penalty.
So you think about Moshe killing the Mitzri, and I think about what do you call Shimon Valevi killing the whole town of Chamor, all the Chamor, and it's
Yeah, well, that would
Beno.
help explain why they weren't killed by Jewish courts because, in fact, well, of course, Moshe was defending somebody, so there's an argument that that was
Okay,
legitimate killing.
but you have
But
Shem
yeah,
Shem
Shem is a
Shem
more
Shem
complicated
Shem
case.
Ben
100%.
Ben Chamor,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they
I
wipe
understand.
out the Shimon Valevi kill the whole town.
100%. But the bottom, and of course, Yaakov curses them for it at the end of his life. The bottom line is that again, it's not saying that it's permitted. You're just not subject to the death penalty. In fact, the note here notes that God willing, when we get to Avodah Zarah, we'll see some of those halachot associated with this brisa that we cited. That in Avodah Zarah Daf Kav Vav, we'll get to this issue. All right, Yishakach,
I
everybody.
mean, it
Looking forward
almost
to
seems like a
continuing this.
person that you don't like. They can go. The Jews they don't like these non. They can just go around killing non-Jews and then.
No, no, no. Again, it's not that you're not allowed to do it. It's just not something that the Jewish courts will punished with death penalty. Again, we may see that it seems like it's very likely that a non-Jewish court will take care of, especially given the context of, that we're in this, that the Gemara is talking about, where there are there is no malchus, so there is no ultimate authority within the Jewish people that is not ruled by non-Jews. So as a result, there are non-Jewish courts, etc., that can handle those cases, and presumably would not be so generous.
Well, the Torah says it. I guess in some of the parsha we read, or says that he's gonna wipe out the help people, the Jews wipe out the other inhabitants of the land. So they move into Eretz Israel, the Chiti, Prizi, Yavusi, and I'm gonna help you out and kill them all, basically.
Yep. Yeah, I mean that's from a moral perspective, it's a difficult thing to understand in our current moral era, but in those days that was a very common occurrence to wipe out everybody that was there. I mean, that's how you ensure that you have control over the entire area.
So that would entail when the Jews move in the land of Israel. That ensures their
Hashem
dominion. That's the
specifically.
dominion. That's when God says you're going to move. We're going to
Yeah,
wipe.
correct. Exactly. That's
ensures
100%.
that ensures halachic dominion over the land of Israel. Then.
Yeah. All right, I gotta go. They're coming into now for the next class. Looking forward to continuing our learning together tomorrow.